Welcome back to Bible Chapter Chat. This week, we're diving into Genesis chapter 26. We're going to be hanging out with Isaac, son of Abraham, dealing with, well, some interesting situations. Famine, a little bit of tricky family dynamics, even, get this, some well drama. You ready to dig in?
Oh, yeah. This chapter might seem like just another story in the Old Testament. But trust me, there's a lot to unpack here. Themes of faith, conflict, we see reconciliation, and even hints of God's bigger plan for humanity. It's all in there.
I love that. Hints of a bigger plan. That's what gets me so excited about studying the Bible. So let's start with the setting. Isaac finds himself facing a famine, which feels a bit like déjà vu, right? Considering what his father Abraham went through.
Definitely. It's almost like God is putting Isaac through a similar test of faith. But here's the interesting twist. God tells Isaac not to go down to Egypt like his father did. He tells him to stay put in Gerar.
Okay, now that's intriguing.
Yeah.
Why do you think God gives Isaac different instructions? Is it like a pop quiz on trusting God's guidance?
I think it could definitely be seen that way. You see, fleeing to Egypt for relief might have seemed like the obvious choice, especially given, Abraham's experience. But God's challenging Isaac to rely on his provision, even when it seems counterintuitive.
It's like God saying, hey, I'm not asking you to follow in your father's footsteps. I have a specific plan for you, Isaac, and it requires a different kind of trust.
Exactly. And this choice, it really sets the stage for Isaac's unique journey. It's a reminder that God often calls us to trust him in ways that might seem, illogical or even uncomfortable. He might ask us to stay put when everything in us screams, run. Or he might lead us down a path that appears less traveled.
It makes me think of that verse, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Easy to say, so hard to put into practice, right?
Oh, absolutely.
But Isaac's story gives us a tangible example of what that kind of radical trust might actually look like.
It really does. And that's just the beginning of the challenges Isaac faces in this chapter. Remember the sister-wife situation? Isaac tells Abimelech that Rebekah is his sister. And that's remarkably similar to what Abraham did with Sarah.
Okay, this is where things get a little awkward. I mean, it worked out okay for Abraham, but repeating this deception, it seems like a risky move for Isaac, don't you think? Is he just copying his dad's playbook, or is there something deeper going on here?
That's a great question. On the surface, it might appear like a blatant repetition of deception that, worked before. But consider this. Isaac is living in a patriarchal society where women are often seen as vulnerable and subject to the whims of powerful men.
So could it be that Isaac, despite being a man of faith, is still shaped by the cultural anxieties of his time, and he's trying to protect his wife, but resorting to this kind of strategy highlights the dangers women faced in that society?
You're exactly right. It's a good reminder that even biblical heroes, they are products of their time and culture. They aren't these perfect beings. They grapple with fear, insecurity, and they make mistakes. Isaac's actions, while understandable in context, don't negate the fact that deception carries consequences.
Right. And those consequences become pretty clear when Abimelech discovers the truth. It's a close call for Isaac and Rebekah. But what's fascinating is that despite this deception, God still intervenes and protects them. And even more strikingly, he reaffirms the covenant promises made to Abraham.
Absolutely. That's a crucial point. It shows us that God's faithfulness and commitment to his promises are not contingent on our perfection. His grace, it covers our failings, and it continues to work in our lives even when we mess up.
Oh, it's such a reassuring truth, isn't it? We're not disqualified from God's blessings because of our mistakes. His love and grace are so much bigger than our shortcomings.
I agree. They are. And this theme of God's unwavering faithfulness, this is woven throughout the entire Bible, culminating in the coming of Jesus Christ, who embodies God's grace and forgiveness in its fullest form.
That's beautiful. So we see God reaffirming his covenant with Isaac, promising him blessings beyond measure. And what happens next? Isaac becomes incredibly wealthy, but this prosperity, unfortunately, leads to some serious tension with the Philistines.
Yes, this is where things get really interesting. The Philistines, consumed by envy, they start filling up Isaac's wells. This might seem like a petty act, but in the ancient world, water was essential for survival.
So filling up a well was a direct attack on someone's livelihood, a way of cutting off their access to a vital resource, a declaration of hostility.
Exactly. And this act of sabotage, it reveals, I guess you could say, a dark side of human nature. We often struggle with envy and resentment when others prosper, especially if we feel threatened or insecure.
That's so true. It's a reminder that even when we experience blessings, we might face opposition and conflict. How does Isaac respond to this blatant act of hostility? Does he retaliate? Does he try to negotiate with the Philistines?
You know, that's what's fascinating about Isaac. Instead of engaging in a power struggle, he chooses a different path. He keeps digging wells.
Keeps digging. That's an interesting response. You'd think he'd get discouraged or try to fight back, but he just keeps digging. More wells.
It really is. It's like he's saying, you can try to block my access to God's provision, but I'm not giving up. I'll keep digging until I find that wellspring of blessing. It's a powerful image of perseverance, you know, in the face of adversity.
And you know what gets me? The names he gives to each well. Isaac, meaning contention. Sitna, meaning hostility. I mean, they reflect the struggles, don't they? The emotional toll of this constant conflict.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's almost like those well names become markers on his journey, a testament to what he's overcome. Almost like a physical representation of his spiritual struggle. This reminder that even when you're in the middle of conflict, God's presence is right there with you.
Yeah. And that brings us to Rehoboth, which means open space, or you could say broad places. Finally, Isaac digs a well and doesn't encounter any opposition. It's this moment of peace, you know, victory after such a long season of struggle.
It's a beautiful image, right? After all that contention, hostility, he finds a place of spaciousness, abundance. Is this where God rewards Isaac's perseverance? Is Rehoboth a symbol of the blessings that just flow when we refuse to give up on our faith?
Well, I definitely think so, but I think it's not just about the external circumstances changing. It's also about an internal shift that takes place within Isaac. He moves from this place of contention to a place of spaciousness, of allowing God to work in the situation, you know?
So it's not just about the physical well, but about the inner wellspring of peace and trust that Isaac cultivates. And this resonates with the message of Jesus, don't you think? Who offered himself as the living water, the source of true satisfaction that can never be taken away.
Absolutely. Even in the Old Testament, we see these glimpses of the coming Messiah, the one who offers that living water that just quenches our deepest thirst. Isaac's journey, I mean, his struggle for that physical water points us toward the ultimate source of spiritual sustenance.
That only Jesus provides. I love that connection. It's just amazing how these seemingly ordinary stories in the Old Testament reveal such profound truths about God, his character, his plan for us. So we've got famine, deception, wells, conflict, and now this moment of peace and abundance. What else happens with Isaac?
Well, right after Isaac finds Rehoboth, he moves to Beersheba, and he encounters Abimelech again. But this time, instead of conflict, we see reconciliation. Abimelech actually seeks to make a peace treaty with Isaac.
Wait, really? The same Abimelech who had previously kicked him out, whose people filled up his wells. What made him change his mind?
It seems like Abimelech recognizes something, like undeniable evidence of God's blessing on Isaac's life. You know, he's witnessed Isaac's prosperity, his resilience, and likely heard about that miraculous discovery of water at Rehoboth.
So it's like Abimelech realizes, okay, this guy is clearly favored by a powerful God. Maybe we should be on his good side. I mean, it's interesting, right, how even people who don't necessarily follow God can recognize his power at work.
Right.
In the lives of those who do.
Right. It speaks to the impact, the undeniable impact of a life that is lived in alignment with God's will. Even those who don't, share our faith can't help but notice the fruit it produces. It's like a powerful testimony to the reality of God's presence in our lives.
Yeah, like a light that just shines so brightly it can't be ignored. But this peace treaty, it also says something about Isaac, doesn't it? I mean, he's willing to forgive, to move forward, to establish this covenant of peace with someone who's wronged him.
You're so right. And that's a key takeaway here. Isaac doesn't hold a grudge. He demonstrates this, maturity, generosity of spirit that really echoes the teachings of Jesus, who calls us to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us.
It reminds us that forgiveness, reconciliation are always possible, even in situations where there's been, deep hurt and betrayal. It's not easy, but it is the path to true healing and lasting peace.
It is. And speaking of lasting legacies, the chapter ends with a little detail that might seem insignificant, but trust me, it sets the stage for a whole lot of family drama in the future. Esau, Isaac's son, he marries Hittite women.
Oh, no, that sounds like a recipe for trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this detail included here at the end? Is it just some foreshadowing, or is there more to it?
It's definitely more than just foreshadowing. This is a pivotal moment. It introduces a potential conflict within the family line and hints at, a tension between God's plan and human choices. Remember, God's covenant with Abraham. It was all about blessing all nations through his descendants.
Right. But Esau marrying outside the covenant people, That raises some questions about who will carry on that legacy of faith. It's like they're planting a seed of doubt, right? Foreshadowing the rivalry that will erupt between Jacob and Esau.
Exactly. It highlights this tension
That's
between
it.
God's sovereign plan, right, and the free will that he gives to us, to human beings. Even though God has a plan, people can make choices that seem to complicate or even, derail it.
It's a good reminder, I think, that the Bible isn't just this collection of nice, neat stories with happy endings. It's messy, it's complex. This tapestry of human choices intertwined with God's unwavering faithfulness. And sometimes those choices lead to conflict, heartbreak, and a lot of unexpected twists and turns.
But even in the midst of those twists and turns, we see God's grace working to bring about his ultimate purposes. And that's, I think, what makes studying the Bible so fascinating. It's a constant reminder that God's ways are higher than our ways. And his plans, they're far grander than we can imagine.
I love that. So we've covered a lot of ground today in our deep dive into Genesis 26. We've seen Isaac's struggles with faith, his encounters with conflict and reconciliation, and his just unwavering perseverance in seeking God's blessing. As we wrap up, what are some key takeaways that you hope listeners will walk away with?
I think for me, the biggest takeaway is just the unwavering nature of God's promises.
Right.
No matter what challenges we face, no matter how badly we mess up, his promises remain true. He's always working behind the scenes, guiding us, protecting us, and ultimately drawing us closer to his purpose for our lives.
I love that. That's such an encouraging reminder, especially in a world that feels so chaotic and uncertain so often. What about you? What stands out to you as a key takeaway from Isaac's story?
I think the power of resilience and perseverance. Isaac keeps digging those wells. He keeps moving forward, even when it seems like the whole world is against him. It's a testament to, the human spirit, our ability to overcome obstacles, find ways to thrive. But more than that, I think it points to the faithfulness of God, who honors that perseverance and ultimately provides.
It's true. And ultimately, Isaac's resilience paves the way for the fulfillment of those covenant promises. I mean, it's through his descendants that the Messiah, Jesus Christ, will eventually come, bringing hope and salvation to the world.
What a powerful connection. Isaac's life, with all the struggles, the victories, it all points toward the ultimate victory of Christ. It reminds us that even in the midst of our own challenges, God is working. His plan is unfolding. And ultimately, good will triumph over evil.
That's powerful. Before we go, is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, just this. I think it's interesting how conflict and reconciliation are kind of woven throughout this chapter. Isaac and Abimelech go from enemies, right, to allies. It shows us that forgiveness, it's always possible. And choosing peace over conflict can lead to some unexpected blessings.
That's a great reminder for all of us. It's so easy to get caught up in our own little worlds, in our own grievances.
Yeah.
Right? But Isaac's story reminds us there's always room for forgiveness, reconciliation, building bridges instead of walls.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today on this deep dive into Genesis 26. We'll see you next time for another chapter chat. We'll unpack more of God's word and discover, more timeless truths that can transform our lives.
Absolutely.
Until then, may you be blessed with spaciousness, abundance, and the unwavering faithfulness of our amazing God.